wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
The Lord of the Rings is my favorite trilogy ever, and I believe it's one of the great works of cinematic art of all time. A big reason why is because of the way the films deal with the issue of loss and tragedy. The central message of the film's major plot is exactly what you heard actor Ian McKellen say so eloquently: control what you can control and make the most of the life we're blessed with. Pro wrestling, in its storytelling and characters, is an art form as well, one that sometimes does deal with heavy issues like this. Great wrestling storylines like the clash of lifestyles in Rhodes Flair, the development of men in Omega and Ibushi's star-crossed lovers, or the people versus the powerful in the CM Punk John Cena feud do imitate life like all great art does. But last year, we as a wrestling community were faced with an art-imitating life moment no one wanted. One that devastated so many and stopped the world of wrestling for a week. Brodie Lee, the beloved wrestler, husband, and father, passed away suddenly. No one on planet Earth had a bad thing to say about Jon Huber, and the story of his devotion to his family, which turned into AEW's company-wide embrace of his widow and 2 children, was one of the great feel-good moments of a very difficult year and a very difficult situation. There can't be enough said about Jon Huber and the respect he commanded all over the world, but what can be said for sure is his loss left a gaping hole in the story he was so artfully telling before his passing. I'm talking about the Dark Order, AEW's first and longest running faction, a group that has been through more ups and downs than an elevator in a 30-story building. Brodie Lee saved the Dark Order, turned them into must-watch TV. This video is about how that group, after the tragic loss of the man who gave them new life, gave his spirit a new life. How the Dark Order, in a time where it would have been so easy to forget them, turned on a dime to preserve a story Mr. Brodie worked so hard to tell. This is a story of art imitating life, even the parts of life we dread every day, and how unimaginable tragedy can create beautiful stories. Now, I may have come in a little heavy-handed with all that, but I do want to state off the top that wrestling is art. It's a very unconventional form of art compared to movies, literature, and music, but beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Art, at its best, reflects the human condition. Have you ever cried when your favorite character is killed in a movie, or beamed uncontrollably when everything in your book turned out okay even when it seemed impossible? Why would you do that? These aren't real people, their stories aren't real, often they're not even in real places. The great C.S. Lewis once said, art and music, quote, are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. In other words, art imitates life. Great artists give us an unfiltered look at the human condition, with all its flaws and all its beauty. It's why, so often, life imitates art too. The Dark Order's art, when it first began, was messy. Starry Night wasn't Van Gogh's first painting, so some growing pains are to be expected. But in professional wrestling, where stories have to be tight and even one mistake can get your storyline axed, you can't afford to have too many ruined canvases. It all came to a head at the end of 2019 when the 381st Dark Order beatdown on AEW Dynamite featured this clip that was shared around wrestling's corner of the internet. That's it. We all thought the Dark Order are done. They're an embarrassment. In some ways, AEW probably thought the same, as the Dark Order story quickly changed. Gone was this creepy group no one knew anything about. Rather, the Dark Order were now a cult, openly recruiting with the use of fairly disturbing vignettes and advertisements on AEW programming. Then there were the mentions of the Exalted One, the mysterious leader of the Dark Order, who had not yet revealed himself. As we know, wrestling fans are a skeptical bunch, and the Dark Order would have to prove that they've made things right. On March 25th, 2020, the Dark Order's Deus Ex Machina arrived in the form of the terrifying Mr. Brodie Lee, one of the few times when the dead silence of early pandemic wrestling really helped enhance the scene. And just like that, the Dark Order was transformed. Now they were cool. Brodie Lee was an unstoppable killer. Anyone around him now must have your respect. The Dark Order began recruiting even bigger names, with breakout superstar John Silver, talented newcomer Preston Vance, and beloved veteran Colt Cabana all joining on. Even though the Dark Order were heels at the time, the undeniable charisma and in-ring ability of Brodie, combined with the great physical storytelling of all its members, garnered plenty of praise online. Their movie was one of redemption, brought on by a man who was simultaneously seeking his own. The movie ended on the highest of high notes, when Brodie Lee shocked the world and decimated Cody Rhodes to win the TNT Championship. Cody had been dominant as champion, but Lee treated him like the jobbers the Dark Order had been just months before. It's a storybook tale. Dark Order had made it. The sequel was the darker, grittier version of the original. Time had passed, the Dark Order were feared, Brodie Lee was a champion, and he had a death grip on the belt. Cody Rhodes returned, his hair darker to match his intentions. He demanded the dreaded dog collar match to avenge his family, all of whom had been attacked by the evil Dark Order. The match, legendary in its stipulation, represented the climax of our picture, a bloody, grueling fight, which stood in stark contrast to the shocking quickness of the climax to the original. The TNT title dog collar match took its place among some of the great dog collar matches ever, recrowning Cody Rhodes as champion in one of the most remarkable matches in TNT's history. Unfortunately, our third and final movie was the saddest of the three. We all remember. Brodie Lee passed away. We saw the tribute show, beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. We got that video package. The world united around a family robbed of their guiding rock, and AEW vowed to help them. But that leaves our novel here without a clear ending, and you need a clear ending. So what could the Dark Order even do? They were heels under the charge of Brodie Lee. They had just said goodbye to their leader, a real-life tragedy that meant the story couldn't continue as normal. The obvious answer here would be to disband the group entirely. In reality, there was no champion amongst them, really no one even close to being champion. Everyone would forgive AEW for quietly putting an end to the story given real-life events, and what good could come out of actually continuing the group? Fortunately, as we now know, that's not what AEW did. The Dark Order continued in the memory of their beloved patriarch. Gone was the cultish recruiting practices and tyrannical leadership. Instead, we got to see the Dark Order for who they were, real people. What ended up making this story so special was that in the worst of times, the people of the Dark Order showed that they were more than two-dimensional characters. John Silver got to show his in-ring ability and boundless physical charisma. Anna Jay went from member of the group to the young up-and-comer hand-selected by the great Brodie Lee to be champion. Colt Cabana got to show his classic comedic chops once again. The group began to form a friendship with Hangman Page, whose reluctance to let anyone get close to him conflicted beautifully with Dark Order's desire to carry out the goal Brodie Lee had before his passing: recruit Adam Page. The story of the Dark Order has been so effective because they've blended real-life tragedy into storyline evolution. Life imitated art, then art had to imitate life. In everything we saw in the Dark Order's antics on Dynamite or Being the Elite, the real people behind the characters were growing closer to John Huber the way the characters were growing closer to Brodie Lee. When he passed, the real people were devastated, and so were their characters. So as the real people began the seemingly Sisyphean task of trying to cope with the tragedy, their characters had to do the same. The Dark Order is a beloved group now, because we're not watching the Dark Order group. We're watching the people behind the masks cope in real time. Leo Tolstoy, author of War and Peace, once said, "Only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow. But this same necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief and heals them." Instead of disbanding the group and moving on, AEW and the Dark Order confronted head-on this great tragedy. But because the people involved did care about John Huber, they did it with grace and class. So what we have now is a tribute to the man himself. His group provides entertainment to now over 1 million viewers a week on Dynamite, a group that was saved by Mr. Brodie's actions. This video would be relevant at any time, but I felt it especially important now as the Dark Order is starting to be used more prominently. Two of its members, John Silver and Preston Vance, have fought for the TNT title. Silver, in particular, has gained plaudits from around the world for his breakout performances in the last few months. Ty Conti, with the help of -1, is the fastest rising female star in the company and just fought for the Women's World title. Hangman Page seems to be tabbed to be a world champion at some point. Hell, even Anna Jay may be poised to have a breakout year once she heals from a shoulder injury. The Dark Order went from being pulled up by their bootstraps by the pure strength and determination of one of wrestling's great human beings, to finding their footing on their own and using that footing to potentially create future stars. We are in a better place now because of the efforts of this group to hold on to Brodie Lee's legacy. Gandalf said, "All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." A meaningless platitude unless you have to go through times you wish had never happened. The Dark Order and AEW made a decision, and that decision has shown us exactly how art in any form, wrestling included, can make the world a better place.